Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Tatas from Showandtellboston, where we talk about all things art, all things Boston. I usually don't do videos like these, but I was asked for a friend to look into this situation involving the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. It's a case involving workplace racism, retaliation, and something like a little bit deeper. At first, I wasn't really sure what I was getting into, but the more I asked questions, the more it became clear that this is bigger than just like one person's job. This is about how racism and nepotism hide in plain sight, especially in places like Boston. Hey. And if we don't talk about these things, then like the pattern tends to repeat. You know what I mean? So let's get into it. So this is me going to the lawyer. I went to their firm, took the crew out, and we just had a conversation about workplace racism, workplace bullying, discriminatory practices, and how you can aid yourself against it, and then like what's going on with this case too. I just wanted to really know what it was that we were dealing with, and right now he'll give you a little bit of background information about why he's credible to take this case. This guy, Matthew Fogelman, he has a pretty good, solid background. He's taken some pretty high-level profile cases, and I'll let him kind of explain who he is and what he does.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Matthew Fogelman. I'm the owner of Fogelman Law Firm in Newton. I have a couple of attorneys that work for me, and we specialize in two areas predominantly: employment law, and that's for employees only, so we don't represent any companies or any institutions, just regular employees, regular folks who are working, and that covers a lot of different areas, a lot of discrimination cases, sexual harassment, unpaid wages. Someone gets fired, we'll help them out with that. So that's the employment law. And then also do a lot of personal injury work. And those are for people that have been injured in a variety of ways. Again, nothing for companies, nothing for insurance companies, only for people. So just helping out the regular folks out there. Yeah, we've had some pretty high profile cases that have come in the office the past few years. One case that people seem to know me for is a trial that I had against Brandeis University in the summer of 2023. And that was a race and gender discrimination case, and we got a very good result in court for that. I've handled some age discrimination cases that have gone to trial, and then we've had some cases that have settled out of court that have gotten some good publicity, including a case for a gentleman who was a truck driver who was paralyzed when a store, they were unloading cargo and dropped it on his head. And unfortunately, he was paralyzed, and that was a very big case in 2024. There's a bunch of protected classes, as the phrase goes, under the law, and that typically includes race, gender, religion, age, sexual orientation, and medical condition. So if someone is in one of those protected groups or protected classes, and they're being treated or mistreated a certain way based upon their membership in that group, that can lead to a discrimination case. And so we've handled a number of cases over the years for people in all of those protected groups. And like I mentioned the Brandeis case before, but that was a case that got a lot of attention. That was for a woman who was a black female. So that case had a race element and a gender element, both baked into that case.
And the MCCA stands for
Massachusetts Convention Center Authority.
MCCA is the agency behind Boston's major event venues like the BCEC in Hines, and even Springfield's Mass Mutual Center. Though it generates hundreds of millions annually, critics say it's been quietly neglecting racial equity.
I started at the MCCA in February of 2020 as an event coordinator. And in my role, I did events for the Lawn on D. So I did all the open community events and stuff, and then gradually went into private events. I left in February of 2025 as an event coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the MCCA cases go, we have 3 cases right now pending against the MCCA. One of them is pending in court, in Superior Court, and 2 of them are pending at the MCAD, the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. All of our clients are black, 1 male, 2 female, and the cases in general have to do with the way that these employees were treated over their years and over their tenure at the MCCA, and various ways in which the 3 clients were mistreated, especially as compared to white people. So a lot of times in discrimination cases, you have what's called comparator evidence. So you might compare how a black person is treated to a white person, or how a woman is treated to a man, an older worker treated compared to a younger worker, and so forth. And so very broadly, those are the issues that are involved in those cases. And we're looking at how our clients were treated within the framework of the institution compared to other people, including people who are not black.
In your personal experiences, what moments stood out to you as clear signs of racism, bullying, or like favoritism?
When they were putting a lot more effort into molding white employees as opposed to black ones. When they started treating our different departments with like the majority departments of people of color are the public safety departments and our building services, which consists of the housemen, the people that set up, and then the people that break down events. They literally, I understand, like, we went through a pandemic. However, a 30-man job was reduced to 10.
In terms of how to identify some more overt racism compared to more subtle racism, I always tell people it's very fact specific. What happened to person X is going to be different from what happened to person Y, and so forth. So we really try to spend time with them understanding the facts and circumstances of their specific situation. How long have they been there? What type of work are they doing? Who are they reporting to? Is anyone reporting to them? How are they being treated compared to some of their colleagues? Obviously, if you have something like name calling, that might be considered more overt, right? Somebody is using a racial slur, a derogatory slur. Those are things that are going to stand out more. In many cases, you don't have something so obvious, right? As you said, it's more under the surface. It's more subtle, right? There's an undercurrent, but it's not quite. It's harder to pinpoint.
I blame the prior generation because it's like some people don't understand what unconscious bias is, and like people just feel like they can say or do whatever they want and it doesn't matter if they offend you, and like we as black people are just supposed to take it. And like if you stand up for yourself, you're being aggressive. I turn into the angry black woman. And just because I'm speaking my mind.
Yeah.
Like, I have the freedom of speech just like you. If you can say this, why can't I react? Even in a respectful manner.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there was a situation when they were talking about the George Floyd marching, and they were saying something about how it makes no sense to have a peaceful march than a riot after. And I made a comment like, well, the people that were breaking the glasses look nothing like me. And it was, okay, conversation over. We're done here.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys can make outrageous comments or make these like create false narrative. But when it's corrected or when facts are being brought, it doesn't matter.
And so what we're doing there is we're really looking at how are they being treated. And that's why I'm saying it's so fact specific. It's hard to compare one case to another. But we're really trying to get into the nitty gritty of what experience are they having in the workplace and how are they being treated.
You can tell in the departments where it is majority black or brown, they were being overworked, underpaid. I know people that were literally doing things that they weren't even supposed to do, like 24-hour shifts.
That is definitely legal.
Exactly. I know an employee, after doing that, they try to butter this employee up and be like, okay, well, we'll just add the extra 8 hours that you did on your next check. And then they ended up firing him because he was complaining about it.
Are they getting as many job opportunities? Are they getting as many promotional opportunities? Are they being paid properly? Are they getting equal treatment as far as the number of hours they're working? Working remotely, vacation, sick pay, all these types of things. Are they being given the same type of assignments as their colleagues?
The majority departments of people of color are the public safety departments and our building services, which consists of the housemen, the people that set up, and then the people that break down events. They literally, I understand, like, we went through a pandemic. However, a 30-man job was reduced to 10. They couldn't get the job done. And I'm like, this is crazy, because if any other department needed extra this or extra that, you guys would provide it.
If someone commits an infraction, how are they being disciplined for that compared to a non-white person?
At one point, after I spoke up for like the housemans and stuff, and like people that I seen not being treated right, I was shunned. My bosses wouldn't even come and acknowledge me.
So really overall, how is this person being treated compared to how other people that are at a similar level, how are they being treated? And then trying to make sure that we're doing the compare and contrast. And if we can pinpoint examples of how people are not being treated equitably or fairly on a comparative basis, then it starts to look like, okay, maybe there's something here that we need to get deeper into. As a white male, I haven't been in the position of what it's like to be a woman in the workplace. I haven't been in the position of what it's like to be a non-white person in the workplace. But I do have a lot of clients who are in those situations, and I spend a lot of time speaking with them and thinking about these issues. So I'm going to answer that even though I myself have not, been in those shoes. What I'm told from a lot of people who are in those shoes is that you tend to feel it. When you recognize it, you tend to feel it. It could be something that's unspoken. It could be the way that somebody's talking to you, looking at you, treating you, but you can feel it. And if somebody is getting that sense, that they kind of just know that it's there, even though it's hard to describe, that's when you should start paying closer attention to those things. And I always tell people it's helpful to document things, because you think, oh, I'll remember what day that occurred or who was at that meeting, but you might not as time progresses. So it's good to document things, especially if you want to seek the advice of an attorney. It's always helpful to have a timeline or a chronology of some sort, And then I get into with the client, is this something that, do you want to register something with HR? Sometimes there are good reasons and opportunities to go to HR and to formally register a concern. There may be situations where it's best not to go to HR. Maybe you want to have the attorney reach out to the company for you on your behalf. And I do that as well. So we kind of take it, situation by situation.
Literally every other day I was getting emails like, this isn't correct, this isn't done this isn't done that. And when I expressed that I was never trained on these things, I was being blamed. It wasn't like, okay, let me help you. And then the process of how they trained people, it wasn't a set process. Like, you were learning from 3 different people, 3 different ways to do things, which is very confusing if there isn't a set way to do it. So you're basically getting 3 different opinions. And when you do the opinion one way, but seek help from another person, I'm basically doubling on the work and having to repeat it or redo it. And then when I go to the person that helped me originally, I have to redo it again. So it was just a constant, I felt like they were messing with my head.
Because these are, oftentimes people use the word microaggressions, just small, sometimes subtle things. And I could see a worker not being sure. Am I being targeted because I'm a woman or because I'm black or Latino? Or is this just a negative environment? Do they treat everyone badly, right? And if it's a workplace where they're just jerks to everyone, then that might not be discriminatory. They just might be jerks. I could think of a worse word to use, but I'll keep it at that. So it's a super question, and it's hard to really give a great answer. That's why I go back to, how are some of your colleagues and your peers being treated? If you can identify, if everyone's being treated badly, including white people, it might be a tougher road. But if you can identify situations where non-males or non-white people are being treated differently, even if it's subtly, that might be the difference between just a straight up toxic, hostile environment for everyone versus having it be a more negative environment for perhaps a more discriminatory or nefarious reason.
They'd walk by me. They'd say hi to everybody around me. Just walk right by me. I just sat at my desk.
Is that what a tense work environment feels like? If you could describe it, is it just like people not talking to each other? Is it
I mean,
like
it's
snide remarks?
definitely an awkward situation where you walk in, you're saying hi to people, or you're walking down the hallway and you're saying good morning, and their response is it really?
Oh, yeah, that's.
And I just walk away. And then if I don't say hi, I'm being disrespectful, or I'm getting talked to about being rude or not having emotional intelligence. I was told that my attitude isn't fit for clients. But if you look at the reviews that I got, clients absolutely adored me to the point where when they returned, they requested to work with me.
So in terms of nepotism, I mean, if somebody really has an inside track, if you will, maybe they're a good friend of the family, or maybe they're a cousin or something. I mean, certainly that's something to watch out for. Nepotism on its own is not discriminatory, right? In other words, it's not illegal for the boss to give preferential treatment to a good friend or a neighbor or a cousin, as long as they're not discriminating against other people.
I actually thought nepotism was illegal to some degree. I need to educate myself more on nepotism, and where it might be illegal. But to tell you the truth, I don't know too much about it. People brought these things up to me, and I'm just kind of exploring them as they come.
Right. So by definition, nepotism is not impermissible. But certainly, again, and I don't want to be redundant, but I mean, if you feel like you're not being treated properly, you're either being disciplined differently or you're not being given the same advancement opportunities.
Advancement opportunities. And that's one thing that we're trying to figure out in this case, because when I first asked Marley about what it was she felt and what was off, this is what she told me.
After my first year doing public programming on the Lawn on D, I expressed that I learned a lot and I wanted to grow there. And I was told there's a line, and the people that have been here before me have to excel before me.
What about that threw you off?
The person that they were speaking about had no desire to do that. She wanted to stick to what she knew. And they pretty much started, when I wanted to grow, they were like, well, this person has to grow before you do because she's been here longer than you.
And she had no desire to, so it's almost like a halt.
She pretty much said she wanted to stay in what she was doing. She was comfortable doing that. And she never said anything about wanting to go into bigger events or do bigger things.
But because she didn't want to grow, that meant you couldn't at all.
Because I wanted to grow, they were basically forcing her to grow.
Matt will continue to give me other examples of what this could look like in other ways.
I have a case I'm working on right now for a white woman, but she's not being given the same advancement opportunities as her male colleagues, even though most of the people in the case are white. That's more of a gender bias that's baked into the system. And certainly for certain industries, we've all heard of like the old boys club, for example, right? The boys network. And if you don't golf or if you don't go to the gym, then you might be missing out on certain promotional opportunities, especially if you're working in a male-dominated industry. So once an employee comes forward to formally, sometimes we use the word complain or raise a concern. I would use those terms interchangeably. What I usually tell people is make sure that if you think you're being discriminated against based upon race, gender, age, etc., and you are going to go to HR, you're going to formally raise a concern, you have to actually specify that you think it's because of that reason. In other words, if you just say, I don't think I'm being treated fairly, that doesn't quite get you to where you need to go in order to get the protection of the law. So we talk about retaliation. And I think maybe one of the things you're asking is if somebody does speak up, now the company starts to retaliate against them, almost to punish them for speaking up. That is something that we see. That is its own claim under the law. So you can have a claim for discrimination. You can also have a claim for retaliation. So the classic example would be, let's say a salesperson, a black person or a woman, let's say they speak up and they think they're being discriminated against. Now the company takes a key account away from them to punish them, right? Like, oh, you spoke up, now we're going to show you. That could be considered retaliatory, and that could lead itself to its own claim under the law, actually making my case better for me, right? Because now I have a discrimination claim. I also have a retaliation claim. But the key I just want to emphasize is if that person goes to raise that concern, if they feel they're being discriminated against, they have to tie it to one of those protected classes. You can't just say, I'm being treated unfairly. You have to say, I feel like I'm being treated unfairly because I'm black, because I'm a woman, because I have this medical condition. Mm-hmm. Then if they retaliate against you, it's protected because you're linking it to the original concern. But if you just said, I'm not being treated fairly, or I don't think you're giving me, the opportunities I deserve, but you don't actually connect it to the protected class, then if you're retaliated against, it might not actually constitute retaliation because it has to be protected activity that we're linking back to. Hopefully that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So if someone complains it's too cold in the office, it's too hot in the office, I don't like the drinks that you guys have in the office, and then they take an account away from you, that's not really retaliation. In layman's terms it is, but under the law it wouldn't be considered retaliation because the concern that you raised was not protected. It was about the temperature, about the drinks. But if you raise a concern that you have to connect it to that protected class, then any pushback that you get or any retaliation that you get is actually considered retaliation as the law describes it.
So I asked Marley, what retaliation did you experience in the workplace?
Oh, they literally sit there and penalize you for stuff. Like they try to find faults in everything you do, try to write you up for erroneous things. And then they just literally keep attacking you like, oh, we need this, we need that. You need to give me this, you need to give me that. You have to get this done in 15 minutes because we need this and this, when it's something that they know you can't get done in 15 minutes. They just literally try to overwork you and push you to your limit, to your breaking point.
And what I'm getting from this experience and from the other people that I talked to is that the retaliation is extremely covert in ways where it's really kind of this workplace bullying where they're trying to drive you insane but do it under the radar so it's not so explicit, so that if you complain about it, there's plausible deniability.
It's literally to your breaking point.
Yeah.
So literally you have a mental breakdown in there, and then they're gonna be like, she's mentally unstable, she can't be here, we're scared for our safety, she's an angry black woman. And
that is the unfortunate reality, is that many people will use stereotypes to make people look certain types of ways. So I ended up asking her, when all this was happening, how did it generally affect you? What was the repercussions of just being in this environment that's essentially hell?
I literally had to seek therapy, and I was told that I suffered from depression and anxiety.
Under state law 151B, as I mentioned before, in terms of emotional distress, mental distress, sometimes called pain and suffering, that's actually part of the law. So if you go forward to trial and you have a trial on discrimination or retaliation, let's say maybe you were demoted, maybe you were terminated, and you think it has to do with a discriminatory reason, if you prevail, you get certain types of damages. One of them could be what's called wages, right? Maybe you were out of work for a period of time. Maybe you had to take another job and that job pays less. Maybe you were denied future opportunities. Those are all compensable. But another area is emotional distress. So emotional distress, mental distress, pain and suffering. When someone's mistreated because of a protected class, that is something that you feel, in your core, right? It gets into your identity. And certainly that is something that is compensable. So I always speak with my clients about how this has affected them. And sometimes it's hard to talk about, those emotions. But when I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't try to explore that with my clients. So usually when you get into it, people will start talking about how it's affected them. Sometimes people can't sleep well. They have headaches. They have stomach problems. Sometimes people lose weight. They gain weight, Sometimes people have to go on medication for anxiety, for depression, for sleep. All of these things are part of the case and part of the damages. Certainly if you seek medical treatment, sometimes people have to go to a therapist. That's something that we look at, and I encourage my clients to do that. You don't have to, though. Some people don't go that route. They might rely on their family members for support and instead of going to a therapist. It's still compensable under the law as long as you can demonstrate that you suffered emotional distress or mental distress because of the way that you were treated. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
What do you think needs to change for the MCCA to prevent like these kinds of like cases from happening?
In terms of the MCCA moving forward, I mean, I know that they have new leadership, and I hope that new leadership, is taking a closer look at these things and taking things more seriously, trying to make the environment more welcoming and more hospitable for people of all races and all colors and nationalities. So I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt that they are doing that moving forward. Of course, that doesn't really help people that have already been through that system, but hopefully moving forward, it will help people. In general, I'd like to see companies continue to focus on DEI, continue to be sensitive to these issues. We have the Trump administration now. There's been a movement nationally away from DEI, away from diversity, equity, and inclusion, and obviously, from my perspective, that is not a good development. I think we need to have a continued. When I say we, companies really need to have a continued sensitivity and a continued appreciation for making sure that the workplace is a welcome place for everyone.
What would justice look like for you in this case?
Holding those in power accountable. Accountability. Mm. Those people who know the wrongdoings that they've done are held accountable, and they face the consequences for their actions. Mm. That's the main reason why I'm fighting and doing what I'm doing, to hold these people accountable because they think they're untouchable.
I think when we're talking about accountability, you're looking at a couple of different things. Monetary compensation is part of civil litigation, right? In civil cases, no one's going to jail. That's a criminal case. So in a civil case, the way our system works in the United States is it's a monetary-based system. So that's an important component of it. Of course, public accountability and public responsibility goes a long way for a lot of clients. When they feel that something's been in the newspaper, for example, or if a case goes to trial, even if a case is settled, oftentimes that can be reported. In Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly, for example, is more of a lawyer's publication, but they cover pretty much every case that comes down. And so I think it's a combination of both monetary compensation as well as some kind of public accountability. And oftentimes when you shine a spotlight on conduct and it's taken from outside the shadows, if you will, and more into the light, usually bad actors will change their ways.
And that's an important piece right there, because taking it out the shadows and have bad actors change their ways is what we need to happen in order for there to be progress. You can't just let things slide. You can't just let things go under the radar. You need to talk about these things, because if not, then they're just going to repeat themselves. Maybe they might cover it up for a bit, but sooner or later, you're not addressing the problem. So that's why you have to talk about it.
There's an old phrase that sunlight is one of the best disinfectants. And so shining a light on something can oftentimes have I would say a deterrent effect moving forward. And so that is something that is important about the legal system in general. There's a lot of cases that are settled privately, of course, and there's a good reason for that. But there's also situations where just things being out in the open hopefully will deter future bad conduct. I don't think anyone is immune from it. It's part of our society in general. I think larger companies, of course, are going to have probably more mechanisms to deal with cases internal. They have an HR department, right? They might launch an investigation. Smaller companies might not have those resources available. They might not have that infrastructure. But I don't think there's any employer. I don't care if it's a publicly traded company. I don't care if it's a college or the local bodega that has 5 employees or 7 employees. I mean, I don't think anyone's necessarily immune from these issues.
Some people mentioned not being able to. What if your HR doesn't have your best interest? What do you do in those sorts of cases?
As far as HR goes, yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes HR does not have the employee's best interest. I think there's a stereotype that HR is always going to have your back. That's not always true. I mean, HR still works for the company.
How did leadership handle complaints from you and others?
They brushed it under the table and protected the people that they chose to protect.
What does that look like?
Like, I made a complaint about being called out my name and being disrespected, and it expressed my need to my director of going to HR.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, let's just handle this outside of HR. And then the issue got brought to HR by the other party, and I got in trouble. And when I expressed to HR that I followed chain of command and went to my director, they looked at him and he was like, nah, well, we tried to handle it.
Oh, wow. So they try to handle it outside of HR?
He said, let's not bring HR into this.
Yeah.
That's what the director said. Let's not bring HR into this. And I said, but this is kind of outrageous.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, we'll handle it behind closed doors. And then they ended up going to HR on me. And I got chastised for not going to HR directly. I said, I thought there was a chain of command we had to follow. Every complaint that I made fell on deaf ears.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one. Like, I have it in writing and everything. Like, I started creating a paper trail after that when I realized.
I was going to say, what should people do?
Put it in writing.
Mm-hmm.
That is the one example of the best thing you can do in a situation like that. Don't have personal conversations, or if you do, send a follow-up email per our conversation. Because I realized that I can't trust these people that I'm supposed to be working with.
Yeah.
And they made it seem like, oh yeah, we're like a family.
That's how they get you.
But it really wasn't.
I don't want to mislabel HR in general, because HR is just as good as that one person that's working there, right? So,
Exactly.
So I've seen HR be very responsive to employees' concerns, and I've also seen HR brush off employees' concerns and really be more of a company man. I would say that's where the lawyer comes into play. So, it's always good to consult with a lawyer. Not only me, but I have a lot of colleagues and peers that anyone can contact, and a lawyer will help you figure out not only do you have a case, but what's the best way to proceed? Should you go to HR? They can help you design the communication that you're going to make with HR. There may be situations where the lawyer actually reaches out to the company and the employee does not go to HR, but the lawyer is the one that reaches out. It also depends on if the person's still working there, right? Sometimes people are in a very untenable situation, but they're still there, and they reach out to an attorney and they don't know, like, should I try to leave the company? Should I stay? How do I make this better? Other times, maybe they've already been fired and they come to the attorney. So I would say if you're in a bad situation, but you're still with the company, it's always recommended to reach out to an attorney, because the attorney can help you assess the situation and help you figure out a plan of how to deal with this. And if the plan is, hey, maybe you should leave the company, the attorney can help try to make that happen and work with the company on an exit strategy and perhaps a severance agreement. Sometimes people will just leave on their own and then call an attorney. I would not recommend that. If you're thinking about leaving, but you feel like it's not a good situation, I would reach out to an attorney before you leave. It actually makes the job for the attorney easier, and perhaps may even give you more leverage to get out of the company as opposed to just leaving on your own volition. Yeah, as far as non-white employees being less believed, that's a great question. I've thought about that a lot, and I'm afraid I don't really have a great answer. I don't think that's something that's specific to Boston or Massachusetts. I think it's probably a national, societal type of problem. You hear sometimes people will be accused of playing the race card or playing the gender card. I obviously bristle at those types of accusations when I hear that, because I feel like if someone, again, you know it when you see it, you know it, or when you feel it, you know it. So if someone is going to go to the lengths in the workplace of claiming that they're being treated in a discriminatory way, it should be believed and it should be listened to, because who wants to bring problems for themselves, right? Who wants to create a problem for themselves for no reason? It's better to just keep your head down and do your work No one's looking to create problems and create drama. So if it's getting to the point where somebody feels like, you know what, I really need to speak up about this, I would like to think that they would be believed. But to answer your question, why sometimes people are not believed, that is probably a very age-old question. And we've certainly dealt with that in our society with women as well, right? And the whole Me Too movement from a couple of years ago, that's still very, very alive and well. I have cases all the time of women that get sexually harassed in the workplace, and they speak up about it, and oftentimes it's brushed off, and it's just excused as, well, that's just Bill. That's just the way he is. Bill. And that's not right, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you'd like to say or you want the public to understand about this case at all?
Yeah, I would say about this case, I mean, I'm proud to represent these employees. They're good people. They were not treated properly over the years that they spent at the institution. But it's not unique. It's not unique to that one institution. Like I said, we have cases all across the spectrum: big companies, medium-sized companies, small companies, private companies, the Commonwealth, towns and municipalities. You see it everywhere. If just to reiterate, I mean, if someone feels that they're being mistreated and they think that it's for some kind of discriminatory reason, I would definitely recommend, consulting with an attorney. I think sometimes people are hesitant to reach out to an attorney, or they feel like, well, I'll do it after I leave the company. And it's usually better to do it while the situation is while you're in the middle of the situation, because sometimes an attorney can help address that and make it better, and maybe make it so that you can stay at that firm, or maybe help you leave. But certainly I would not hesitate to reach out to an attorney and not wait if you feel like something's going on and you're not comfortable with it.
Yeah. So in this case, you have 3 different people that you're representing. What's the timetable on that? When will we see some resolution to that?
As far as resolution goes, I have to say the system does move pretty slowly. Most lawyers who are part of the system know that, and there's only so much that a lawyer can do to move things forward. We're sort of at the mercy of the system. What I will say is that the system does move. Mm-hmm. It moves slowly, but it does move. Cases don't linger forever. They do wend their way through the system. It just does take a while. Court has its own tracking order and timetable, and the MCAD has one as well. I can't really pinpoint you an exact day or time, but as far as discovery, as far as making their way through the system, I think that's probably the best answer that I can give, that we are making our way through. But I do tell people that they need to be patient. Mm-hmm. And if you think that something is going to happen quickly, it probably is not going to.
If anybody's interested in understanding, I believe everybody should read the Prince LaBelle report. That report is very detailed and explains everything that was occurring there, mm-hmm. and absolutely proves the racism.
So what the Prince LaBelle report was the MCCA commissioned an outside investigation. And this is fairly common in cases that I've been involved in, where allegations are raised and the company or the institution wants to bring in an independent law firm or an independent investigator, and they will go through all the paperwork. They'll look at every email, text messages, they'll interview people, and they'll do a deep dive, and then they'll write a report. And so that's what happened in this case. And sometimes, depending on the results, and I think what happened in this case was the report validated some of the concerns that were being raised. I don't think I can go through point by point, but certainly did validate, I think, some of the concerns that were being raised about some of the institutional and systemic issues that had been going on at the MCCA.
Black people aren't getting promoted.
Mm-hmm.
In the executive role, there was no person of color, and the highest paid person of color was like number 29 on their list. And it makes no sense, because these people are actually qualified for the job, and then you have unqualified people doing jobs that they know nothing about, but still getting 6 figures.
So the Prince LaBelle report, I thought was helpful and instructive in a number of ways. I would say in general, in a lot of the cases that I see, we do see pay inequity. And it's interesting, in Massachusetts, we have something called the Massachusetts Equal Pay Act, MEPA. Some people call it MIPA. But very fascinatingly, it only applies to gender. And the idea of it was to make sure that women and men were being paid for equal work. So the theory is that if you have if men and women are working a similar job, it doesn't have to be the exact job, but a similar job, and they have similar background. So we look at education, we look at experience. Assuming that they are working a similar job and they have the similar background and experience, women should be paid as much as men. Mm-hmm. And the reason that law was put into place was traditionally women are not paid as much as men. Now, again, if you have someone has 10 years of experience, someone else has 5 years, that might be a reason to pay them more. Or someone has a law degree or a business degree, the other person only has a college degree. Or someone has a college, the other person has high school. That could be a reason to pay them more. But assuming similar education, experience, and background, and assuming they're doing the same job, they should be paid the same. Mm-hmm. That law right now is for gender only. It does not apply to race. And I'd like to see possibly some legislative changes in that area where, again, for similar, we're always talking similar job, similar background, experience, but non-white people should be paid as much as white people, assuming that those other things are true. Now, you can get at that in a case through 151B, through the discrimination law. So there's still a way to get at it, but you could also get at that through a gender claim under 151B, and we also have the Equal Pay Act. So I think there could be an opportunity to expand the Equal Pay Act to address race as well as not just limit it to gender. But yes, I mean, of course, you want to look at positions of leadership, right? Mm-hmm. So typically people that are higher up in the hierarchy are going to be paid more. And so one thing we look at is, well, how many non-white people are working at a particular place? That's one level of inquiry. But then as you go up the ladder, how many non-white people are in positions of authority? Mm-hmm. You know, how many non-white people are board members? You know, are they in leadership? Are they in the executive committee? And so that's where you get into peeling that onion. So yes, having non-white employees working somewhere is good. That's admirable. But if all the non-white people are at the bottom of the org chart, yeah, that's not so great, right? So it's hard to give a general answer. But I would say in general, we're looking as a lawyer. You know, I'm wanting to see non-white people, and again, women as well, being, you know, not only integrated into the company, but also being able to penetrate those higher levels. And getting into more, you know, higher up positions. And that of course, is going to come with additional compensation. Yeah. I think the article and the report can certainly be tied to discrimination. And if you have a black employee that's doing the same job as a white employee, and again, assuming similar background and so forth, they should be paid the same. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would certainly be considered inequitable if they were not being paid the same, and arguably discriminatory. You know, you hear about the glass ceiling sometimes. I think traditionally that's been referred to for women. Mm. I would say that applies to race as well.
Could you just explain the glass ceiling for people who don't know?
Sure. I mean, I don't actually remember the origins of the expression, but essentially you can only go so high, right? And so to get into those higher levels, you have to break through. You have to break through that glass in order to get to the top. Whereas traditionally white people or men are assumed that they're going to get to those top levels.
Why does this matter?
I think people should pay attention to this case because it involves numerous plaintiffs or numerous employees. It's not just limited to one person. So it tends to suggest that, you know, something was going on at this institution that was problematic. So sometimes, you know, there is strength in numbers. That being said, I have plenty of cases where only one person was targeted, and I wouldn't want anyone who felt like there was not strength in numbers. Like, I'm the only one that's being targeted. Don't feel like you need to have other people with you. You know, like if you're the one person that's being targeted, that is just as valid as if there were 3 people or 5 people.
So, in case you don't really know, my organization, we usually do panels talking to people, so I wasn't really planning on making this video. Once I heard about what people were dealing with and I read the report myself, I realized that this needs to be documented. If this video opened your eyes, please share it, talk about it, because silence protects power. And if people don't start speaking up, nothing will change. So share this video, read the Prince LaBelle report, support the workers speaking out, and follow the story for updates.